Some say Wheel of Time is a fantasy series for kids. Some say it's a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. Some say it's fantasy that predates the more mature fantasy that you can find today, if you think so, that it is more mature. That is, of course, my favorite, Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson and Ian C. Esselmont. We have R. Scott Bakker's Darkness Comes Before, which is really, really brutal and grim dark. We have, of course, George R. R. Martin's Game of Thrones. So, Wheel of Time is a different kind of beast, but a beast it is because it's 14 books. I have read the first two, Eye of the World, The Great Hunt. You can find Eye of the World review on my channel, and you can also find a lore primer for A Wheel of Time, and that is non-spoiler. This video will of course include some light spoilers on The Great Hunt, but if you haven't read Eye of the World, there will be of course spoilers. If you haven't read The Great Hunt yet, I think you still can watch this one, even though, as I said, if you want to know nothing, please stop now. But if you don't mind for some minor spoilers for The Great Hunt, if you've read Eye of the World, you can continue, of course. I will give you a short overview of the plot in this video. I will also give you my thoughts on the book, and also compare it with other kinds of fantasy out there. So I'm all in for the fantasy. I like the journey of reading different kinds of fantasy and mythology. So this is part of that. And that was also my intent when I started to read Wheel of Time. It was like, yeah, maybe I should do that because it was very popular in the 90s when I only read Lord of the Rings. And I heard some friends reading Wheel of Time, but I didn't really take it seriously. So for a few months ago, I just decided, well, I should try Wheel of Time. But I'm glad I did it because I'm very surprised by it, and I'm very happy to share that info with you here. It is very true that Eye of the World, the first book, is a fantasy, epic fantasy in a very classic format. We can't shy away from that. It starts in Edmundsfield in the world of, in the Eye of the World, in the Wheel of Time world. And we start in the kind of pastoral England where we meet the three main characters. That is Rand, that is Perrin, and that is Matt. We also get in contact early in the book with the Aes Sedai, the magicians of the world. Gandalf-like, if you would say, but at the same time not. And here in the first book we meet Moiraine and her warder Lan. We also get in contact early in the book with Nineveh and Egwene, which are connected to Edmundsfield and also connected to this magic circle, you could say, called the Wisdom. And there are connections there to Aes Sedai, which they don't know in the beginning. Rand has also a father who, Tam, right? And he has a very secret past that Rand doesn't know about. Rand has the idea that he is the farmer boy. This is, of course, very much like the Shire, even though they are humans. And we will find other races later in the book. But Rand is don't know so much about his background, but he has the idea, and all the people in Edmundsfield, this British village, countryside, England, believe that the things they've done there, they have done that all their life. But suddenly, as I said, the Aes Sedai comes there, and then there is also a Trolloc attack, which turns everything upside down, of course. And creatures called the Myrdral, or the Fade, also visits the Edmundsfield, and they don't know why, but Wheel of Time series is filled with legend, filled with mythology, and filled with great stories, I would say. A lot of civilizations, cultures, customs, and so on. So early in the book, they don't know why they are thrown out on this adventure. They have clue on that. But the first book is basically character building and also a coming of age story for, I would say, all the three main characters, Rand, Matt, and Perrin, and also Nineveh and Egwene. So they have this perception of being, very simple people, but they are drawn into a epic conflict with something called the Dark Friends. And I won't go into lore concepts here, but as I said, you have a lore primer video on the channel that you can start to watch if you are curious on the Eye of the World. Now I will go into spoiler territory completely, but very shallow still. Because when we end Eye of the World, because they have this long journey from Edmund's Field called the Blight or Faldara, and that is to the northeast, and they go from the west. So the distance is not that long, but I suppose it's as long as the journey from Shire to Mordor in a way. And the book is still much bigger than Lord of the Rings. The first book is 600 pages in this version, and this is also 600, so I've been binging 1200 pages recently then. But when we end the Eye of the World, they have been revealed and understand that they are part of something called a pattern, and feels like a very Buddhist, speaking of spirituality, maybe Hindu idea here, that the everything is cyclical. Everyone plays his or her part in the story we call life, and maybe we can't do so much about it, at least if we don't belong to the pattern, because pattern means that you are Tavern, and Tavern means that you can affect the life that has been weaved for you. And when I say weaved, I also think about the Norse mythology with the Norns, maybe you say in English, three old ladies who spin a thread, and that thread is called life. And in this case, they belong to this tavern. That's why Moraine is interested of them, I suppose. And we don't really. I mean, I suppose they are good people, Matt, Rand, and Perrin, but still we don't know. And there is a kind of shadiness in that in the book that it's a bit, some people view Rand, Matt, and Perrin as dark friends and others not. We also learned that in Eye of the World, Matt finds, first of all, Rand has the sword from his father, and that is a Heron sword. And then Matt, they find a dagger, which is very mysterious. And I would say Matt has a Gollum-like features, not in his way, but it's a split persona for what is important. If you prioritize himself and the purpose for that, or the group, some character in between, I would say. And then we have Perrin, which he gets, you could say, shape-shifting abilities, which is quite cool. So they understand that they are part of the pattern of the tavern. And in the end of Eye of the World, we also get to know that they find something called the Horn of Valir, or Horn of Valerie. And it's said that this horn is very, very special. That is, I suppose, the cover on this book. See if you see it good. You see there the horn, and it is said that when the horn sounds, the battle against the Dark Lord begins. And when someone initiates that, there are certain historical events that will happen again, like the breaking of the world. There is also this aspect of this concept of dragon and Wheel of Time, where there is no dragon at the moment. There have been a dragon, someone called a dragon, who everything ended in a cataclysmic battle. So even if this proclaimed dragon is something people hope for, because the dragon fights against evil, when that kind of battle appears, the world also changes and comes in flux. The geography changes, it becomes chaotic, it can actually lead to war and more problems, and even though that the salvation might come in the end then. But during this period we read about, and especially in the Eye of the World, we learn that there are many false dragons. People say they are the dragon, and they do that because then it can gather a following, but they are false prophets, so to speak. So there is the Great Hunt. The book Great Hunt has to do with the hunt for this horn, because the horn in the beginning of Great Hunt is stolen, or lost basically, and so many people are looking for the Great Hunt, and there seem to be many false dragons at once. With that said, I'm early in the book. This is book 2 of 14, so I might have gotten some lore concepts wrong. Apologies for that. There's a huge Wheel of Time community out there. If you want to search things, I don't do that. That's part of my reading process, not doing that, instead guessing and trying to understand it for myself. But the hunt here for the horn is central in the book. And I think that the Great Hunt and Eye of the World, I would say, are filled with many memorable and great characters. Of course, the first book is very interesting with the coming of age story, and you have Maureen there. We also have an important character called Tom Marilyn in Eye of the World. He will appear in the Great Hunt. I won't tell you how and why. And you also have, I don't want to spoil that, you have the enemy basically in the Great Hunt, which you also get to know in the Eye of the World as well. That is very important and has an important role when it comes to this hunt for the horn, for example. So in a way, I think Great Hunt is kind of a detective story and also an action oriented book. It could be an action movie, actually. Still, the Great Hunt is slow. I mean, it's 600 pages, and this is, as you know, before these more modern fantasy writers that I talked about in the beginning. That means that there are much more exposition in the Great Hunt and the Wheel of Time compared to fantasy that you can find today. Good or bad, it depends, I think, on what you have to do. When I come home from a hectic workday, I think it's quite nice to read this exposition. I think it's quite nice to read about quite a simple plot, but it will get more complicated. I promise you that. But in the beginning, especially Eye of the World, half the Great Hunt is quite simple, easy to follow. But then it gets more complicated, and one thing that makes it complicated is the Aes Sedai, which are the magic circle I talked about with Maureen, because they consist of 8 or 9 different groups called Ajas, and they in between have conflicts, and they are disliked by an inquisition called the Children of Light, and because the Children of Light hunts dark friends, the evil people in this world, but it seems like the Children of Light is misjudge who are the dark friends sometimes and sometimes not. So they have a shady role in the story, which is very important. And then you have the aspect of true dark friends, and then you have the aspect of actually people thinking that Rand and his friends are dark friends. So it's more nuanced than Lord of the Rings, even though it has the tropes. I also enjoy that the Great Hunt has much more of world building than Eye of the World. Eye of the World, pastoral England towards this blight, and very predictable fantasy landscape in Eye of the World. But in Great Hunt, I think Robert Jordan surprises us with a lot of things. Also new kind of races like the Ogier. We have Loyal, which is a funny guy, like you and me. He likes a lot of books. It's a kind of uneven way of telling fantasy here, probably because it is in the 90s, I suppose, because sometimes it's written for younger people and sometimes for older people. It's quite a kind fantasy, I would say, cozy fantasy, but it can become quite brutal, but not with the kind of gory explanations that we have in Game of Thrones or in Backer. This is something completely different, but still very entertaining to read. There is also a lot of poetry and things like that. I don't think Jordan's poetry is so fun to read. I think Tolkien's was much better, but I like the idea of having songs and so on. We also have the opportunity to follow Nineveh, Egwene and Morin, because they take part of the politics of the Aes Sedai in the White Tower, and that is, I found it a bit boring first, actually, because it reminded me a lot about Harry Potter. But if you like Harry Potter, that's great. But halfway through the book, I would say the power struggles within the Aes Sedai and White Tower becomes very interesting. More Games of Thrones-like, but not as gory, as I said, or brutal, but still more of a political scheming. Then it becomes more interesting. We also get a lot of new races, as I said here. Not only friendly races like Loyal, which is a funny guy, a furry guy. I imagine him like the Beast in the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast. Furry guy, big ears. Quite of a we get the feeling of him being a kind of Ent, maybe from Lord of the Rings, because it's a bit slow and so on. But he's a funny character, a bit childlike, but works for adult people as well, I would say. I think he might be the reader, actually. So I think it's maybe the idea that we should identify us with Loyal the Ogre. Ogier, I think it's called, not the Ogre. There are many concepts here that are interesting, like steading, that's connected to the Ogre, a place where you can't use channel magic. And there's magic in this world called Saidin and Saidar, for example. Only women can channel that kind of magic nowadays. Men can, especially these proclaimed dragons, false proclaimed from time to time. But they need to be tamed by the female magicians or Aes Sedai. So that's an interesting concept, I think. During the in the legend, during this cataclysmic age of legends and breaking of the world, as I understand it, there were male Aes Sedai, but then they become mad. I think it's called Age of Madness 2, and it might be different things here. So sorry if you know this better than me. And yeah, they became mad, basically, the men. So they need to be tamed. But you have this concept of magic, which is a bit more complicated than Lord of the Rings, for example. We also have something called Waygates. I won't spoil that too much, but I got the connection to, or association to, Stephen Erickson's Warren. Let's see if you think like that when you read about when you read The Great Hunt, or if you have read it. Does it remind yourself of Warren? So if you've only read Eye of the World, why not read Malazan Book of the Fallen? Completely different fantasy, but still some kind of Warren aspect there, because they travel through different dimensions and with other kind of rules. But they also physical laws and so on, magical laws. But they also travel in time in these, now I call it Warrenston. way gates, and that is interesting too. So they experience times that have not happened or have happened, and so on. By doing that, they can experience older history of the Wheel of Time, and I think that's very, very cool and very interesting to open up. It's nothing new in fantasy, but Jordan does it really good. And if you don't know so much about Robert Jordan, he's an American author. Unfortunately, he died some decades ago in disease. So it's Brandon Sanderson who has finished this series. Please convince me. I'm not so fond of Sanderson, but still, I've heard that he finished off these books really, really good. So maybe you have better views on Sanderson than I have. When it comes to the characters, I really enjoy Rand, the main character, because he's a reluctant hero. There was a lot of talk about that when I started to read Eye of the World, but I didn't think he was that reluctant for being a hero. But I think it got more complicated, and he got more opposed to being a hero in the end of Eye of the World. But that increases in The Great Hunt, I think, and that is an interesting thing. He doesn't want to be this kind of hero as people view him in sometimes. So that creates a great tension in the book and drama. Even though we have it in Lord of the Rings with Frodo, it's not near as much as in The Wheel of Time. As I said before, the struggles of Matt is interesting, even though it's not really Gollum. You couldn't say that, but there is something Gollum-like with his struggles. And then we have Perrin with his shape-shifting story, which I enjoy a lot. That's the thing that Jordan does, that you can feel that things remind you of, especially Lord of the Rings and Eye of the World, but he moves those kind of stories, characters, personalities, motivations to different characters, and he mixes them up. So I think where I am now in The Wheel of Time, he basically has made it his own story now, and I think from the half of after the half book, the 50% of the book, I think that Jordan has his own story, and then I think the book also gets better. There is also something that happens here in the middle of the book that means to me that it changes tone and atmosphere. It's not only the cozy fantasy that I talked about. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but there are, you could say, perspectives and motivations that change for the main characters around chapter 30, if you've read The Great Hunt. And that makes the story much more mature, I would say. And I actually was really happy to read that. It made me more motivated to continue. Because there is a competition what you can read, as you know. So of course you have to think about, should you continue, should you not continue. So the maturity of the characters, which maybe has to do with the coming of age concept, is very important. And I would also say that the story becomes much more layered and nuanced as well. And it's not that difficult to keep things, understand things, but it becomes trickier the longer you come in the Great Hunt, for example, and that's positive. So I'm looking forward to read the next book. There is a lot of things that are interesting here, and there are spiritual value, I would say, in the Great Hunt and the Eye of the World, and that is a few things I just will mention briefly now. If you want, I can make a special video on that, and that is the friendship aspect, of course, of the Ranmat Perrin coming from the pastoral village of Edmondsfield, and also Egwene, Nineveh, and so on, which are also from there. The magic system is very interesting and has, of course, spiritual aspects to that, and also the aspect that the women has to tame the men who can get mad by channeling this power. Of course, that's a difference in stereotypes when it comes to gender. So that is of course interesting and good to read about as well. Even though that's a bit tropey too, because it's very one-sided. So there are only a few characters here which are detailed and fleshed out. So even if there can be more nuances than older fantasy, it's kind of stereotypical anyway and tropey. For me, no problem. So I like to read different fantasy, but bear that in mind. It's not so fleshed out as modern fantasy when it comes to character, for example. But with that said, it becomes more easier read if you have a lot to do. There's a lot of exposition. As I said, can be good or bad, but I kind of enjoy, expositions about nature or when they are eating, as a contrast to other fantasy and other books I'm reading. So if you can do that, you can have this in your reading diet and you can change books. But if you hate exposition, of course, this will be troublesome for you. There is a bit of it's very humorous, and it's funny, it's cozy, and it's great payoff in the end. The end is one of the best ends in the fantasy book I've read. So of this type of fantasy. So at least read the first two books and see what you think about Wheel of Time, and then you can decide to DNF or not. But that's an advice. I really enjoyed the ending. It was very epic. But I think that the struggles that the group have in the middle of the book, especially, it sounds a bit dramatic. Things if they have a problem, or if there is a fight, or if there is a conflict, or they have to scheme politically about something. It feels like a really great story, but then how they solve it can be very simple, or it can go very fast. So I get a bit surprised, like, oh, wasn't more to that problem that they had? But I think it compensates a bit with the ending, which is very good. It ties a lot of things together, and made me very energetic to just go on to the third book. So all in all, this is a great reading experience, especially if you like to study fantasy, or if you, as a genre, and especially if you have a hectic study life, work life, anything, and need some easier things to read, go for Wheel of Time. And it's very entertaining. If you like, values, spiritual values, and if you like emotions, because I laughed when I read The Great Hunt and Eye of the World, and I got upset and I got tears sometimes. It's not the most advanced writing here, right? Still, I got the feelings, and I think feelings are very important when you read. So, have you read The Great Hunt? Have you read The Eye of the World? What are your thoughts? And what are your thoughts about my thoughts? I will continue, as I said, to the next book, The Dragon Reborn. I really like these covers as well. And as you know, I have a lot to read. So I will try to read this, at least to finish it before August, let's say August, so I don't promise too much. I have other things to read if you're new on the channel. So I'm reading a lot of other fantasy like Ryan Cohen. I'm constantly reading Malasan Book of the Fallen. A lot of videos on the channel is about Malasan Book of the Fallen. I also have a cyberpunk short story writing project. I don't want to go into in this video why I've chosen cyberpunk, even though I'm such an avid reader of mythology and fantasy, but there is a video about that too, which you can watch, of course. So I hope you have enjoyed your time. So like, share, subscribe, and so on, all these YouTube fancy words if you want to do that. Yeah, do that, and we'll see each other very soon. And I used to drink teas in this video, so if you're here, so still here, so I'm drinking this black Yunnan Tea is very important in my reading preparations and to clear mental fog for reading. That's another topic too. You can find videos about that. So nice to have you here. Nice to be here with you. See you very soon. Bye.